Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Measured in Midnight Hours. Dominic Severo stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of the gas station, the fluorescent light casting harsh shadows across his face. At 34, the toll of working 3 jobs had etched itself into the lines around his eyes. He splashed cold water on his face, a temporary remedy for the exhaustion that had become his constant companion. "You good to finish your shift?" asked Roland, the night manager, poking his head through the door. "Always am," Dominic replied, forcing a smile as he straightened his uniform. He had 2 hours left before heading to his morning security job at Westlake Mall, then 4 hours of sleep before his afternoon shift driving for SureRide. The routine had been his life for the past 4 years, ever since Adrian had been accepted to Glenwood Medical School. They'd met 10 years ago at Briarwood University, where Dominic had been finishing his business degree and Adrian was completing undergraduate studies in biology. Their connection had been immediate, her ambitious intelligence complementing his pragmatic determination. When Adrian confessed her dream of becoming a doctor but lamented the cost, Dominic had made a decision that would alter the course of his life. "We'll make it work," he'd told her, mapping out a financial plan on their kitchen table. "Your dream is worth it." The wedding had been small, just before Adrian began medical school. They'd agreed to postpone having children until after her residency. What they hadn't factored in was the 2019 recession that wiped out Dominic's middle management position at Caldwell Industries, forcing him to take whatever work he could find. Now, as he punched out at 4 a.m., Dominic calculated the remaining loan payments in his head. 7 more months, and they'd be debt-free. Adrian's graduation was in 3 days. After that, everything would change. The sacrifices would finally pay off. His phone buzzed with a text from Adrian, working late at lab. "Don't wait up." Dominic pocketed his phone without replying. These messages had become increasingly frequent over the past year. Initially, he'd been concerned, but Adrian had explained that her final year demanded everything she had. He understood sacrifice better than most. As he drove home through the empty streets, Dominic allowed himself to imagine their future. Adrian's medical career taking off, maybe a private practice, children eventually, and himself returning to the business world with the flexibility to be present for their family. He pulled into the driveway of their modest rental house, his body moving on autopilot through the motions of entering quietly, showering, and setting his alarm for his next shift. As he slid into bed, he noticed Adrian's side was still empty. The digital clock read 4:37 a.m. Sleep claimed him before he could wonder where exactly his wife's lab work was keeping her at this hour. Across town, in the upscale Ridgeline Heights neighborhood, Adrian Severo sat on the edge of a king-sized bed in a modern high-rise apartment, buttoning her blouse. "Must you go?" asked Dr. Vincent Blackwell, the hospital's rising star neurologist and Adrian's clinical supervisor. At 42, his salt and pepper hair and confident demeanor had attracted more than one medical student. But Adrian had been different, brilliant, determined, and unhesitating when their professional relationship crossed into personal territory 18 months ago. "Dom will notice if I'm not home by morning," she replied, checking her reflection in the mirror. Vincent watched her from the bed. "How much longer are we going to keep up this charade? Your graduation is in 3 days. After that, everything changes," Adrian finished, leaning down to kiss him. "I promise." As she drove home, Adrian rehearsed the speech she'd been crafting for weeks. Dominic deserved honesty after everything he'd sacrificed. She would explain that people change, that the ambitious girl he married had grown into a woman with different needs and aspirations. Vincent understood her in ways Dominic couldn't. The pressure of medicine, the social circles they'd need to navigate. She'd offered Dominic a generous settlement from her future earnings. It was the least she could do. By the time she slipped into bed beside her sleeping husband at 5:15 a.m., Adrian had convinced herself that ending their marriage was an act of mercy. Dominic deserved someone who could love him completely, not someone who had outgrown him. What Adrian failed to notice was the slight change in her husband's breathing when she entered, the imperceptible sign that Dominic was awake, registering the scent of unfamiliar cologne that clung to his wife's skin despite her careful shower at Vincent's apartment. Chapter 2. paper trails and whispers. 2 days before the graduation ceremony, Dominic sat in his car outside their house, staring at the envelope in his hands. Inside was proof of what he'd suspected for months, but had denied acknowledging. Bank statements showing regular transfers from their joint account to an account he didn't recognize. Phone records revealing hundreds of text messages to a number saved as Dr. B, and hotel receipts forwarded to their home email that Adrian thought he never checked. It had started with a misplaced credit card statement 4 months ago, a charge for dinner at Ellison's, a restaurant far beyond their means, on a night Adrian claimed to be at the hospital. When confronted, she'd explained it as a celebration with fellow students after passing a critical exam. Dominic had believed her, or at least pretended to. Then came the changes in behavior. New clothes, different perfume, withdrawing from his touch. The classic signs he'd been too exhausted or too trusting to properly read. The final piece had fallen into place 3 nights ago when he'd awakened to find her slipping into bed at 5 a.m. The unfamiliar cologne had triggered a clarity that cut through his exhaustion. That morning, while Adrian slept, he'd begun his investigation. Now, with undeniable evidence in hand, Dominic faced a decision. Confrontation seemed the obvious choice, but something deeper, a cold, calculating voice he barely recognized, suggested patience. In 3 days, Adrian would graduate. In 3 days, his financial obligations to her education would be complete. Dominic had always considered himself a reasonable man, fair to a fault. But as he sat in his car, watching the house they'd shared through years of sacrifice, he felt that fairness calcify into something harder, something with edges sharp enough to cut. He tucked the envelope under the seat and entered the house where Adrian was preparing dinner, a rare occurrence that immediately raised his suspicions. "You're home early," she said, smiling in a way that now seemed performative. "Shift ended sooner than expected," he replied, carefully matching her casual tone. "Something smells good. Chicken piccata. I thought we could celebrate a little early." She gestured to a bottle of wine already open on the counter. "The hospital assigned my residency placement today. I got neurology at Glenwood." "That's fantastic," Dominic said, accepting the glass she offered. "Everything you wanted." "It's a competitive position," Adrian continued, seemingly relieved by his positive reaction. "Working with Dr. Blackwell will be an incredible opportunity." At the mention of the name, Dominic's hand tightened imperceptibly around his wine glass. Dr. Blackwell, the mysterious Dr. B from her text messages. "You've mentioned him before," Dominic said carefully. "He must think highly of your work." A flush crept up Adrian's neck. "He's been very supportive." They ate dinner with a facade of normalcy, discussing the upcoming graduation ceremony. Adrian mentioned that her parents would be attending, flying in from Phoenix the night before. "I reserved them seats in the front row," she explained. "There's a special section for families of graduates." "Will I be sitting with them?" Dominic asked. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Hesitation, guilt, calculation. "Actually, I wasn't sure about your work schedule. I know how hard it is for you to get time off." "I've already arranged it," Dominic replied, watching her closely. "I wouldn't miss your graduation for anything." Relief and something else. Was it disappointment? Crossed her face. "Of course. I'll add you to the list." After dinner, Adrian announced she needed to return to the hospital to complete some paperwork for her residency. Dominic nodded, saying he had paperwork of his own to handle. Once she was gone, he opened his laptop and accessed their home security system, a modest setup he'd installed after a break-in 2 years ago. The system included a feature Adrian didn't know about. It logged all Wi-Fi devices connecting to their network, including their locations within range of the house. The data confirmed what he already knew. On nights when Adrian claimed to be at the hospital, her phone often registered at home for brief periods before disappearing again until early morning, just long enough to change clothes or collect overnight items. As Dominic scrolled through the logs, a plan began forming in his mind. The graduation ceremony would be Adrian's moment of triumph after years of hard work. Work that he had financially supported through countless graveyard shifts and missed holidays. If she intended to discard him now that his usefulness had ended, he would ensure the separation occurred on his terms, not hers. He spent the night researching, making calls to old contacts, and setting up new email accounts. By morning, he had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Dr. Vincent Blackwell. His position at the hospital, his reputation as a brilliant but arrogant physician, his divorce 5 years ago, and his pattern of mentoring attractive female medical students. Dominic also discovered something Adrian likely didn't know. Blackwell was being considered for the position of chief of neurology, a promotion that would be announced shortly after graduation. A promotion that could be jeopardized by scandal. When Adrian returned home the next morning, Dominic was already dressed for work, brewing coffee in the kitchen. "Late night?" he asked casually. "The paperwork was more involved than I expected," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "I ended up crashing in the on-call room." Dominic handed her a cup of coffee. "Only one more day until graduation. Then we can finally start the next chapter of our lives." Adrian took the cup, her fingers brushing his. For a moment, something like regret shadowed her features. "Dom, after graduation, we should talk. About the future." "I'm counting on it," he replied. Chapter 3, Public Execution. The Glenwood Medical School graduation ceremony was held in the Grand Pavilion of the Harper Convention Center, a glass and steel structure that gleamed in the May sunshine. Rows of chairs faced a stage adorned with the school's colors, while proud families filled the auditorium with an excited buzz. Dominic arrived early, dressed in a charcoal suit he'd purchased specifically for the occasion. It had cost more than he'd spent on himself in years, but today demanded something beyond the worn business attire that had seen him through countless job interviews following the layoff. He spotted Adrian's parents in the reserved seating area and approached with a practiced smile. "Margaret, Robert, good to see you," he said, shaking Robert's hand and accepting Margaret's perfunctory hug. "Dominic, you're looking tired," Margaret observed, her tone suggesting this was not a compliment. The relationship with Adrian's parents had always been strained. They had opposed the marriage, believing their daughter was settling by attaching herself to someone without family connections or substantial wealth. "3 jobs will do that," Dominic replied pleasantly. "Is this seat taken?" He gestured to an empty chair beside them. Robert glanced around uncomfortably. "Actually, Adrian arranged specific seating. I believe you're in the general family section." Dominic's smile didn't waver. "There must be some mistake. Let me check with the coordinator." He approached the woman with the clipboard who was directing guests. After a brief conversation and showing her his ID, he returned to his in-laws. "You're right, Robert. I'm not seated with you." He paused, watching their expressions shift to smug satisfaction. "I'm seated on stage. Adrian arranged for me to present her with her diploma. A surprise, apparently." The lie slid off his tongue with surprising ease. The coordinator had indeed confirmed he wasn't seated with the Harrisons, but the rest was fabrication. What mattered was the flash of panic that crossed Margaret's face. "That's unusual," she stammered. "Adrian didn't mention it." "It was meant to be a surprise," Dominic replied. "But now that you know, I should probably check in backstage. Enjoy the ceremony." He walked away, feeling their eyes on his back. Instead of heading backstage, he found his assigned seat in the general family section, deliberately choosing an aisle seat with clear visibility of both the stage and the reserved seating area. As the ceremony began, Dominic watched the proceedings with detached interest. The dean's speech about dedication and sacrifice struck him as particularly ironic. When Adrian's name was called, he observed her ascending the stage with practiced poise, accepting her diploma with a broad smile. What happened next would be seared into his memory forever. As graduates were invited to acknowledge those who had supported their journey, Adrian stepped to the microphone. Dominic tensed, uncertain what she would say. "I'd like to thank my parents, who always believed in my potential," she began, gesturing toward Robert and Margaret. "And I would especially like to acknowledge the person who truly made this achievement possible. The one who supported me through every challenge, who believed in my dream as if it were his own." Dominic felt a momentary softening, a flicker of the love that had motivated years of sacrifice. Then Adrian extended her hand toward the side of the stage. "Please join me, Vincent." From the wings emerged Dr. Vincent Blackwell, handsome in an expensive suit, moving with the confidence of a man accustomed to admiration. He took Adrian's hand and stood beside her at the microphone. "This is Dr. Vincent Blackwell," Adrian continued, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "My mentor, my inspiration, and," she hesitated for only a fraction of a second, "my husband. The man who made me the doctor I am today." A murmur rippled through the audience. On stage, Blackwell smiled and kissed Adrienne's cheek, the picture of a proud spouse. In the family seating area, Robert and Margaret Harrison exchanged glances of confusion that quickly morphed into something like calculated acceptance. Dominic sat perfectly still, his expression betraying nothing of the volcanic rage building within him. So this was her plan, not merely to leave him, but to erase him entirely from her narrative, to rewrite history with Blackwell as the supporting husband. He rose from his seat, straightening his tie as he walked deliberately toward the stage. The security guard at the steps gave him a questioning look, but Dominic flashed the visitor badge he'd been given at registration and mounted the stairs with measured steps. Adrienne was just concluding her speech when she noticed him approaching. The color drained from her face. Beside her, Blackwell stiffened, clearly recognizing Dominic from Adrienne's description. The microphone was still live when Dominic reached them. The entire auditorium had fallen silent, sensing the unfolding drama. "Congratulations, Dr. Severo," Dominic said calmly, using her married name deliberately. "What a remarkable achievement." "Dominic," Adrienne whispered, her voice still amplified by the microphone. "I can explain." "No need," he replied, his voice carrying clearly. "I believe you've already explained everything quite thoroughly." He turned to Blackwell, extending his hand. "You must be Vincent. I've heard so much about you, though apparently not your most significant role in my wife's life." Blackwell hesitated before accepting the handshake, his grip betraying his discomfort. "I should clarify something for everyone," Dominic continued, turning to face the audience. The dean made a motion to cut the microphone, but Dominic was already speaking. "I am Dominic Severo, Adrienne's legal husband. For the past 4 years, I've worked 3 jobs to support her education: midnight shifts at a gas station, mall security, and rideshare driving. I've paid every bill, every tuition installment, so that she could pursue her dream." Adrienne grabbed his arm. "Dom, please." He gently but firmly removed her hand. "I'm not here to make a scene. I simply wanted to congratulate you properly on your achievement. Our achievement, really, since we both sacrificed for it." He turned to address Blackwell directly, though some sacrifices were clearly more significant than others. The microphone went dead, but the damage was done. Hundreds of eyes watched the tableau on stage: the mortified graduate, the uncomfortable husband, and the betrayed spouse whose dignified response only highlighted the other's deception. Dominic turned to leave, but paused to add one final comment, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "By the way, Adrienne, the divorce papers are in your mailbox. I filed them yesterday. Congratulations again, Doctor." With that, he descended the stairs and walked out of the auditorium, his exit observed by a stunned audience. Behind him, the ceremony dissolved into uncomfortable whispers and stares. Outside in the bright May sunshine, Dominic loosened his tie and took a deep breath. The public exposure had been satisfying, but was merely the opening move in the game he'd begun. Adrienne and Blackwell had humiliated him today, but they had no idea what was coming next. As he drove away from the convention center, Dominic made a call to a number he'd acquired just yesterday. "Ms. Reeves, this is Dominic Severo. I believe we have a mutual interest to discuss." On the other end, Teresa Reeves, administrator for the hospital board and a woman with her own grievances against Vincent Blackwell, agreed to meet him that afternoon. The foundation had been laid. Now it was time to build. Chapter 4: Collateral Damage. Teresa Reeves nursed her second whiskey at the corner table of the Huntsman, an upscale bar far enough from the hospital to avoid medical staff. At 52, with silver-streaked black hair and the sharp features of someone who had fought her way to administrative power, she carried herself with the calculated precision of a woman accustomed to being underestimated. "I appreciate you meeting me, Ms. Reeves," Dominic said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Teresa," she corrected, studying him with interest. And my curiosity got the better of me. "It's not every day I receive a call from the husband of one of our incoming residents, especially one with such complicated circumstances." "You saw the graduation ceremony?" "I didn't attend, but news travels quickly in hospital circles." She sipped her drink. "Dr. Blackwell has created quite the situation for himself." Dominic nodded. "And for my wife. Ex-wife soon, technically. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Severo?" "Information," Dominic replied, placing a manila folder on the table. and perhaps an alliance of sorts. Teresa raised an eyebrow, but made no move toward the folder. I'm not in the business of revenge, Mr. Severo, regardless of my personal feelings about certain neurologists. This isn't about revenge, Dominic lied smoothly. It's about consequences. Vincent Blackwell used his position to pursue a relationship with a student under his supervision. A clear violation of hospital ethics, I would imagine. Technically, medical students aren't hospital employees, Teresa pointed out. The relationship is inappropriate, certainly, but not necessarily actionable from the hospital's perspective. And if the relationship began while she was under his direct supervision? If there's evidence he altered her evaluations or influenced her residency placement? Teresa's expression sharpened. That would be different. Do you have such evidence? Not yet, Dominic admitted. But I know it exists. Adrian's placement in Blackwell's department was suspiciously convenient. Teresa finally reached for the folder, opening it to scan the contents. Printouts of text messages, financial records, and a timeline Dominic had constructed. This is thorough, she noted, but circumstantial. The hospital board would need more. That's where you come in, Dominic said. I understand Blackwell is being considered for chief of neurology. Teresa's eyes narrowed. That information isn't public. Neither is his affair with an incoming resident. Yet here we are. Dominic leaned forward. I also understand you were passed over for chief administrator last year in favor of Blackwell's friend, despite your superior qualifications. A flash of genuine anger crossed Teresa's face before she controlled it. You've done your homework. I've had practice supporting someone else's education, Dominic replied dryly. Research comes naturally now. Teresa closed the folder and slid it back. What exactly are you proposing? Access to hospital records, specifically Adrian's evaluations and the residency selection committee's notes. Evidence that Blackwell influenced the process. That would be highly unethical, not to mention illegal. More unethical than a department head sleeping with a student he's evaluating? Dominic countered. More unethical than denying you a position you earned because of an old boys network. Teresa swirled the remains of her whiskey, considering. Hypothetically, if such records existed and showed irregularities, what would you do with them? Ensure they reach the appropriate authorities. The hospital board, perhaps the medical licensing committee. Anonymously, of course. And your wife? Ex-wife. Teresa corrected herself. She would be collateral damage. Dominic's expression hardened. She made her choice. Teresa studied him for a long moment. You don't strike me as a vindictive man, Mr. Severo. I wasn't, he replied simply. Until yesterday. After a prolonged silence, Teresa finished her drink and stood. I can't help you access confidential records. That would be career suicide. Dominic nodded, accepting the rejection. I understand. Thank you for your time. However, she continued, gathering her purse, the hospital's digital security is embarrassingly outdated. The administrative passwords change on the 1st of each month, and the May password is Helix Genesis 22. The residency committee records are stored in the shared drive under Placements 2023. Dr. Blackwell's personnel file would be under restricted access, but interestingly, the same password works for those files too. She placed her business card on the table. If you happen to find any irregularities, my anonymous tip line is quite discreet. After Teresa left, Dominic ordered a bourbon and contemplated his next move. The information she had provided was valuable, but using it required careful timing. The hospital's internal investigation would need to coincide with other elements of his plan. His phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. We need to talk. Please come home. Home. The concept seemed hollow now. Nevertheless, confrontation was inevitable, and perhaps useful for his purposes. An hour later, Dominic unlocked the door to their house to find Adrian pacing the living room. Her graduation regalia had been replaced by jeans and a sweater, her face scrubbed of makeup. What the hell was that? She demanded immediately. You humiliated me in front of everyone. That's an interesting perspective, Dominic replied calmly, closing the door behind him. From where I stood, you were doing an excellent job of humiliation without my help. I was going to tell you after the ceremony, Adrian said, her voice dropping. I never meant for you to find out like that. When exactly did you mean for me to find out that you're apparently married to another man? That's bigamy, by the way. A felony. We're not legally married, she clarified hastily. It was symbolic. We're planning to make it official after our divorce, Dominic finished. How considerate. Adrian sank onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. I didn't plan for this to happen, Dom. Vincent and I. It just developed. Over the 18 months you've been seeing him behind my back. Yes, I imagine it did develop. Her head snapped up. How did you? Credit card statements. Hotel receipts. The fact that you come home at 5 a.m. smelling like another man's cologne. I'm tired, Adrian, not stupid. A tense silence filled the room. I'm sorry, she finally said. You deserved better. Yes, Dominic agreed. I did. The divorce papers are legitimate. I filed yesterday. Given the circumstances, I think we can agree on an uncontested divorce. Adrian nodded slowly. Of course. I'll sign whatever you need. Good. I'll be staying at a hotel until I find a new place. I'll collect my things tomorrow. As he turned to leave, Adrian called after him. Dom, what you said on stage about paying for everything. I want you to know I plan to repay you. For the tuition, the loans, everything. Dominic paused at the door. That won't be necessary. Consider it my graduation gift. The irony in his voice was unmistakable. Please, I want to make this right. He turned to face her one last time. You can't make this right, Adrian. But don't worry, I'm not interested in your money. I'll get what I'm owed another way. The confusion and first flicker of fear in her eyes was deeply satisfying as he closed the door behind him. Outside, in the privacy of his car, Dominic made another call, this time to Maxwell Stone, an investigative journalist he'd contacted earlier that day. Mr. Stone? Dominic Severo. I believe you might be interested in a story about ethical violations at Glenwood Medical Center, specifically involving their new chief of neurology and a certain incoming resident. The pieces were moving into place. Chapter 5, The Invisible Hand. Maxwell Stone's office at the Metropolitan Gazette reflected its occupant, cluttered but meticulously organized, with decades of journalistic awards displayed alongside photographs of Maxwell with various public figures. At 61, Stone had the weathered appearance of someone who had seen too much of human nature's darker side, but remained stubbornly committed to exposing it. These are serious allegations, Mr. Severo, Stone said, examining the documentation Dominic had provided. Relationship with a subordinate, falsified evaluations, manipulated residency placement. All verifiable, Dominic replied. The timestamp on the altered evaluation is particularly interesting. 11:42 p.m. on January 15th, from Blackwell's hospital computer. I have hotel receipts showing he and Adrian checked into the Westbrook Hotel at 9:20 that evening and didn't check out until morning. Stone raised his eyebrows. You've been thorough. I had motivation. Clearly. Stone leaned back in his chair. But I have to ask, why come to me? Why not go directly to the hospital board or licensing committee? Institutions protect their own, Dominic explained. A public expose creates pressure they can't ignore. Stone nodded slowly. And your wife? This will destroy her career before it begins. Ex-wife, Dominic corrected. And no, it won't destroy her career. It will delay it, complicate it, force her to earn it legitimately. There's a difference. Cold, Stone observed, without judgment. Practical, Dominic countered. She made her choice knowing the potential consequences. Stone gathered the documents, tapping them into a neat stack. I'll verify these independently before publishing anything. If it checks out, the article runs next week. The timing needs to be precise, Dominic insisted. The hospital board meets on Thursday to finalize Blackwell's promotion. The article needs to break Wednesday morning. I don't work on anyone's schedule but my own, Stone said firmly. But if verification is complete, Wednesday works. As Dominic left the newspaper office, he checked his watch. He had a meeting with Len Porter, his former supervisor at Caldwell Industries, in 30 minutes. The company had recovered from the recession and was expanding again, creating opportunities Dominic intended to leverage. Len greeted him warmly at Hudson's Steakhouse, a favorite among Caldwell executives. Dominic, good to see you, man. How long has it been? 3 years. Almost 4, Dominic replied, shaking his hand. Since the layoffs. Len's expression sobered. Right. Tough times. You were one of our best. I fought to keep your position, you know. I appreciate that. Dominic accepted a menu from the waiter. How are things at Caldwell now? Booming. We've expanded into medical technology, hospital systems, equipment financing. The healthcare sector is where the growth is. That's actually why I wanted to meet, Dominic said, settling into business mode. I understand Caldwell recently acquired MediFinance Solutions. Len looked surprised. How did you know that? The acquisition doesn't go public until next month. I keep my ear to the ground. Dominic smiled. And I happen to know that MediFinance has a significant contract with Glenwood Medical Center, specifically their equipment leasing agreements. Len studied him with new interest. You always were well informed. Yes, that contract is a major asset in the acquisition. What if I told you Glenwood is about to face a substantial ethics scandal? One that could affect their funding, their partnerships, and potentially that contract. Len's expression turned serious. I'd say you should explain yourself very carefully. For the next hour, Dominic outlined the situation with Blackwell and the hospital, explaining the looming scandal without revealing his personal connection. He positioned himself as an insider with advanced knowledge, suggesting that Caldwell could either be caught in the fallout or position itself advantageously. The hospital will need allies when this breaks, Dominic explained. Financial partners who understand the situation and can help navigate the crisis. MediFinance contract could be leveraged to influence hospital policy, specifically how they handle the responsible parties. And you're telling me this because? Because I want back in at Caldwell, as the point person for the Glenwood account. Len sat back, impressed. You've thought this through. I've had time to consider my next move carefully. The position would be Director of Healthcare Partnerships. Significant responsibility, significant compensation. I'm ready for both, Dominic assured him. By the time they parted, Dominic had a tentative offer contingent on the verification of his information. If everything proceeded as planned, he would start the Monday after the story broke, perfectly positioned to influence Glenwood's response to the scandal. As evening fell, Dominic checked into a suite at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a luxury he wouldn't normally allow himself, but that served a specific purpose tonight. He needed to be visible, to establish his whereabouts clearly. At 8:30 p.m., he received an encrypted email from Teresa Reeves containing internal hospital communications about Blackwell's promotion and concerns raised by another physician about his relationship with Adrian. Concerns that had been mysteriously dropped after the physician was offered a research grant. The final piece arrived at 10:15 p.m., confirmation from Stone that his sources had verified the key claims. The article would run Wednesday morning. Dominic ordered room service and a bottle of 18-year-old scotch. As he savored both, he reflected on the events that had led him here. The man he had been 4 days ago, exhausted, devoted, trusting, seemed like a stranger now. That man had believed in sacrifice for love, in building a future together through honest labor. This new version of himself believed only in precision, in consequences perfectly calibrated to the offense. Tomorrow, he would collect his personal belongings from the house. Adrian had texted that she would be at the hospital all day, signing paperwork for her residency. Paperwork that would soon be meaningless. As he poured another scotch, Dominic raised his glass in a solitary toast. To new beginnings, he murmured to the empty room. Chapter 6, Pressure Points. The Metropolitan Gazette hit newsstands early Wednesday morning with a front-page headline that sent shockwaves through Glenwood Medical Center. Ethics scandal rocks prestigious hospital. Chief of neurology accused of improper relationship, manipulation of residency placements. Maxwell Stone's article was meticulously researched, citing anonymous sources within the hospital administration and providing redacted copies of altered evaluations. While it didn't name Adrian directly, it referred to an incoming neurology resident whose relationship with Dr. Vincent Blackwell raised serious ethical concerns about the integrity of the residency selection process. By 8 a.m., Dominic was seated in Len Porter's office at Caldwell Industries, watching the fallout unfold via the hospital's internal communications, courtesy of Teresa Reeves, who had begun actively feeding him information once the story broke. The board called an emergency meeting for noon. Dominic informed Len. Blackwell has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Len nodded approvingly. And MediFinance contract? The CFO has already reached out to your team, concerned about potential clauses regarding institutional reputation. Your representative indicated Caldwell might be willing to maintain the relationship under modified terms. Perfect. Len slid a contract across the desk. Director of Healthcare Partnerships, effective immediately. The Glenwood account is your priority. Dominic signed without hesitation. 4 years of financial sacrifice had given him an intimate understanding of hospital finances, insurance systems, and medical billing, knowledge that now made him exceptionally qualified for this position. "I'll need to be at Glenwood this afternoon," Dominic said, standing to shake Lynn's hand, "to introduce myself as their new Caldwell representative." "Of course." Lynn grinned. "Show them Caldwell stands by its partners, even in difficult times." At precisely 2 p.m., Dominic walked through Glenwood Medical Center's main entrance wearing a tailored suit from the same designer Blackwell favored, carrying a briefcase embossed with the Caldwell Industries logo. The receptionist directed him to the administration offices, where the atmosphere was tense with crisis management. He was escorted into a conference room where several board members and administrators had gathered, including Teresa Reeves, who betrayed no recognition when he entered. "Mr. Severo, from Caldwell Industries," the assistant announced. Dr. Harold Winters, the hospital's chief of medicine, looked up sharply. "Severo? Any relation to Dr. Adrian Severo?" Dominic smiled pleasantly. "Her husband, actually. Soon-to-be ex-husband." The room fell silent as recognition dawned on their faces. "This is highly inappropriate," Dr. Winters began, "given the circumstances." "The circumstances being that your chief of neurology has been engaged in an inappropriate relationship with my wife while she was under his supervision?" Dominic finished calmly. "I agree, it is inappropriate. But my personal situation is separate from my professional role. Caldwell has sent me to discuss the MediFinance contract in light of recent events." Dr. Winters looked to Teresa, who spoke with calculated neutrality. "Mr. Severo is Caldwell's designated representative. We can request another, but it would delay negotiations considerably. Time you don't have," Dominic added. Given the publicity situation, the board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable but constrained by financial reality. "Very well," Dr. Winters conceded. "What is Caldwell's position regarding our contract?" For the next hour, Dominic outlined terms that subtly leveraged the hospital's vulnerability while appearing supportive. Caldwell would maintain the equipment leasing agreements with minor modifications that gave Dominic direct oversight of implementation and regular access to hospital operations. As the meeting concluded, one board member asked directly, "Mr. Severo, given your personal connection to this situation, how can we be assured of your objectivity?" Dominic closed his briefcase deliberately. "My wife's actions and Dr. Blackwell's ethical violations are not my concern in this room. My responsibility is to Caldwell Industries and its interests. That said, I would naturally recuse myself from any discussions directly involving either party." "And the article?" Another pressed. "Did you have any involvement?" "The truth has a way of emerging," Dominic replied, neither confirming nor denying. "Now, I believe Dr. Blackwell is scheduled to meet with the board at 4 p.m. I wouldn't want to delay that important conversation." As he left the conference room, Dominic caught Teresa's slight nod of appreciation for his performance. The alliance was proving mutually beneficial. In the lobby, Dominic encountered exactly the person he had timed his exit to meet. Vincent Blackwell, arriving for his meeting with the board, his normally confident demeanor visibly shaken. "Dr. Blackwell," Dominic greeted him, extending his hand as if they were colleagues. "Difficult day?" Blackwell stared at the offered hand with barely concealed hostility. "What are you doing here?" "Business," Dominic replied, withdrawing his hand smoothly. "I represent Caldwell Industries now. We're discussing the hospital's equipment leasing agreements in light of recent developments." Understanding dawned on Blackwell's face. "You're behind the article. This whole thing." "The article merely reported facts," Dominic said, keeping his voice low but intense. "Facts you created when you decided my wife was an acceptable acquisition while I paid for her education. This won't change anything between Adrian and me," Blackwell insisted, though his uncertainty was evident. "We'll weather this." "Perhaps," Dominic conceded, "though the board might have questions about your judgment. Falsifying evaluations is particularly problematic for someone being considered for chief of neurology." Blackwell paled. "How did you know about the promotion? Or the falsified documents?" "I'm thorough, Dr. Blackwell. More thorough than you anticipated when you decided I was an inconvenient obstacle to be discarded." Before Blackwell could respond, his phone rang. He checked it, then looked up with fresh alarm. What have you done? At this moment? Nothing. I'm simply standing here having a civil conversation with my wife's mentor. Dominic glanced at his watch. Though I believe the licensing board may have received certain documentation about an hour ago. Purely coincidental timing, I'm sure. Blackwell's composure cracked. You vindictive bastard. No, Dominic corrected him. Just a man ensuring appropriate consequences. Good luck with the board, Doctor. I hear they're particularly concerned about potential liability. As Dominic walked away, he received a text from an unknown number. Teresa, using a burner phone. Board discussing suspending B's license pending investigation. A being removed from neurology residency program. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The hospital was reacting exactly as anticipated, protecting itself by distancing from both Blackwell and Adrian. Outside the hospital, Dominic met briefly with a real estate agent who handed him keys to a newly leased penthouse apartment in the city's financial district. A dramatic upgrade from the modest rental he had shared with Adrian, and a statement about his changed circumstances. That evening, as he arranged his minimal possessions in the sleek new space, Dominic received a call from Adrian. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful message. Dom, please call me back. Everything's falling apart. They've suspended my residency placement. Vincent is facing a licensing review. I don't understand how this happened, but I need to talk to you. He deleted the message without responding. Instead, he opened his laptop and reviewed the latest communication from his attorney. Adrian had signed the divorce papers that afternoon. Given her current vulnerability, she had agreed to all terms without contest, including the clause relinquishing any claim to future assets or earnings. As Phase 1 of his plan reached completion, Dominic turned his attention to Phase 2. Destroying Blackwell and Adrian's professional standing was merely the foundation. The true architecture of his revenge required more creative elements. He opened a secure email account and composed a message to Maxwell Stone, attaching financial records showing suspicious transfers between Blackwell's personal account and a medical research foundation he controlled. Transfers that coincided with equipment purchases from a supplier that paid generous consulting fees. The subject line read simply, "For your next article." Chapter 7, Calculated Risks. 3 months after the graduation ceremony, Dominic sat in his corner office at Caldwell Industries, reviewing the quarterly report on Glenwood Medical Center's equipment leasing program. The view from the 32nd floor offered a panoramic vista of the city skyline, a physical manifestation of his rapid professional ascent. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Severo, your 3 o'clock appointment is here." "Send her in," Dominic replied, closing the report and standing to greet Dr. Eliza Carrington, the newly appointed chief of neurology at Glenwood. Dr. Carrington entered with the precise confidence of someone who had earned her position through merit rather than manipulation. At 48, she combined clinical expertise with administrative acumen, qualities that had made her Dominic's natural ally in restructuring the hospital's relationship with Caldwell. "Dominic," she greeted him warmly. "The new imaging equipment arrived yesterday. The installation team was remarkably efficient." "I'm glad to hear it." He gestured toward the sitting area by the window. "Coffee, please." As they settled into the comfortable chairs, Dominic poured coffee from the carafe his assistant had prepared. "I understand the board was pleased with last month's budget projections." "Ecstatic would be more accurate," Eliza confirmed. "The new leasing structure has reduced our quarterly expenditures by nearly 18% while upgrading our diagnostic capabilities. You've become something of a hospital hero." Dominic smiled modestly. "Just good business. Caldwell benefits from Glenwood's success." Eliza studied him over her coffee cup. "And the personal satisfaction doesn't hurt, I imagine." "I'm not sure what you mean." "Please," she said with a knowing look. "We're colleagues now, possibly friends. We can acknowledge the elegance of what you've accomplished. Blackwell is finished in medicine. The licensing board revoked his credentials last month. Your ex-wife has been forced to accept a residency at County General in general practice, not neurology. And you've emerged as an indispensable partner to the institution that enabled their betrayal." Dominic neither confirmed nor denied her assessment. Life has a way of balancing accounts. "Indeed." Eliza set down her cup. "Which brings me to the other reason for my visit. Vincent Blackwell has been attempting to contact various board members, making allegations about you." What kind of allegations? That you orchestrated his downfall using falsified evidence. That your position at Caldwell was secured through manipulation. That you coerced hospital staff to provide confidential information. Dominic maintained his composure. Desperate accusations from a disgraced physician. That's the board's conclusion as well, Eliza assured him. Particularly since he can't explain how you could have falsified emails from his own account or fabricated hotel receipts in his name. Has he approached my ex-wife with these theories? Apparently not. According to hospital gossip, they're no longer speaking. Their relationship didn't survive the professional fallout. This information, while satisfying, was not unexpected. Dominic had calculated that Blackwell's commitment to Adrian would crumble once she became a liability rather than an asset. I appreciate the warning, Dominic said. Though I doubt Blackwell can cause any real damage at this point. Probably not, Eliza agreed. But I thought you should know. The board values our partnership too much to allow unsupported accusations to interfere. After Eliza departed, Dominic called his assistant. Cancel my remaining appointments today, and have the car brought around. 40 minutes later, Dominic was seated across from Maxwell Stone in the journalist's cluttered office. 3 months of collaboration had established a productive professional relationship, with Dominic providing carefully curated information and Stone transforming it into headline-making exposés. Your tip about Blackwell's research foundation was gold, Stone was saying, pushing a copy of his latest article across the desk. The NIH has opened an investigation into misappropriation of grant funds. I thought they might, Dominic replied, scanning the article with satisfaction. What's next? Stone leaned back. I've been looking into County General's residency program. Seems your ex-wife isn't having the smooth transition she hoped for. Oh, Dominic maintained a neutral expression. Rumor has it she's struggling with the caseload. Without Blackwell's protection, her actual abilities are being tested. Several patient complaints have been filed. That's unfortunate, Dominic said, not entirely feigning his concern. Despite everything, he had never doubted Adrienne's intelligence or potential as a physician. Her failings were ethical, not intellectual. I'm not pursuing that angle, Stone assured him. Too personal, not enough public interest. But I thought you might want to know. Dominic nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the information. And speaking of information, I have something that might interest you regarding Glenwood's former CFO and certain real estate investments connected to hospital expansion. As he outlined the new lead, Dominic reflected on Phase 2's progress. Blackwell was professionally destroyed. Adrienne was struggling without her protector. The hospital board now viewed Dominic as an essential partner rather than an embarrassing connection to a scandal. But Phase 3, the true culmination of his plan, required more personal involvement. It required Dominic to confront the emotional reality of betrayal, not just its practical consequences. Later that evening, in his penthouse apartment, Dominic opened a locked drawer in his desk and removed a small velvet box. Inside was Adrienne's engagement ring, the one she had lost 18 months ago, around the time her relationship with Blackwell began. In reality, Dominic had found it hidden in her jewelry box when collecting his belongings from their house. He placed the ring beside a printed email from County General's chief resident, an old college friend who had agreed to provide updates on Adrienne's performance. The latest report confirmed Stone's information. She was indeed struggling, working double shifts to compensate for negative evaluations, isolated from colleagues who had heard about the Glenwood scandal. Beside these items, Dominic positioned a third element, a USB drive containing recordings of conversations between Blackwell and hospital suppliers, documenting kickback arrangements and preferential contract terms. Material that could potentially result in criminal charges, not merely professional censure. These 3 objects represented the final phase of his plan, a strategy that would require Dominic to reopen wounds he had carefully cauterized. But as Teresa Reeves had observed months ago, some sacrifices were more significant than others. He picked up his phone and, for the first time in 3 months, dialed Adrienne's number. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The coffee shop Dominic had selected for meeting Adrienne was deliberately neutral territory, neither upscale enough to intimidate nor casual enough to suggest disrespect. He arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. When Adrienne walked in precisely on time, Dominic was struck by the visible changes 3 months had wrought. The confident poise she had displayed at graduation had been replaced by a tense vigilance. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally meticulous appearance showed signs of neglect. Chipped nail polish, hair hastily secured, clothing that hung slightly loose on her frame. She spotted him immediately, her expression cycling through surprise, wariness, and something like hope before settling into careful neutrality. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "You sounded urgent on the phone," Dominic replied, pushing a cup toward her. "I ordered your usual almond milk latte, extra shot." The small gesture of remembered preference visibly affected her. "You remember how I take my coffee. 4 years of marriage creates habits," he said without emotion. "How are things at County General?" Adrienne's fingers tightened around the cup. "Challenging, but I'm managing. From what I hear, that's generous. 3 patient complaints in 2 months isn't managing by most standards." Her head snapped up. "You're keeping tabs on me?" "I maintain connections in the medical community now. Information flows naturally." Adrienne took a slow breath. "Did you invite me here to gloat? To see what you've reduced me to?" "I invited you because you called me, Adrienne. You said it was important." She stared into her coffee for a long moment. "Vincent has been making accusations about you, claiming you orchestrated everything. The article, the investigation, his license revocation. He's become obsessed with the idea." "And what do you think?" Dominic asked, watching her carefully. "I think Vincent created his own problems," she replied, surprising him with her candor. "But I also think you saw an opportunity for payback and took it. I don't blame you for that. Generous of you." "Not really." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "I deserve what's happened. I betrayed you after years of sacrifice. I lied, repeatedly. I was going to discard you once you'd served your purpose. There's no moral high ground for me to claim here." The admission, so direct and unqualified, momentarily disarmed him. Dominic had anticipated defensiveness, perhaps attempts to justify her actions. This straightforward acknowledgement of wrongdoing didn't fit his script. "Why did you call me, Adrienne?" "Because Vincent has moved beyond accusations to threats," she said quietly. "He's talking about exposing evidence that you manipulated hospital records. He claims to have proof that could implicate both you and someone named Teresa Reeves." Dominic maintained his composure, though this development was concerning. If Blackwell had indeed uncovered evidence of his collaboration with Teresa, there could be serious repercussions. "What does he want?" "For me to help him," Adrienne said, disgust evident in her voice. "He wants me to approach you, to try to extract some kind of confession or admission. He's recording our conversations, looking for anything he can use." "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I've caused enough damage," she replied simply. "Because whatever you did was in response to what we did first. And because Vincent abandoned me the moment my career became a liability instead of an asset." The irony wasn't lost on Dominic. Blackwell had discarded Adrienne precisely as she had planned to discard Dominic. What exactly does he have? Email records showing unusual access to his personnel file from an administrative account. Network logs showing someone accessed the residency committee records using Teresa's credentials at times when she wasn't in the building. Dominic considered this information carefully. The evidence was circumstantial but potentially damaging if presented to the right authorities. "Has he approached anyone with this yet?" "He's compiled a file for the hospital board," Adrienne confirmed. "He plans to present it next week." Dominic nodded slowly, recalibrating his plan. The timeline for Phase 3 would need to accelerate. "Thank you for the warning. I'll handle it." "Dom," Adrienne said hesitantly. "I know it's meaningless now, but I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. For betraying you when you gave up so much for me." For a moment, Dominic allowed himself to remember the woman he had married. Ambitious but kind, driven but compassionate. The woman he had loved enough to sacrifice his career for. "The divorce is final," he said finally. "We've both moved on." "Have we?" she asked quietly. "Because I'm not sure I have. Or can." The vulnerability in her voice triggered a warning in Dominic's mind. This wasn't the calculated manipulation he had expected from her. It appeared genuine, which made it more dangerous to his resolve. "I need to go," he said, gathering his coat. "I have a meeting at Caldwell this afternoon." "Of course." Disappointment shadowed her features. "Thank you for meeting me. And for the coffee." As he stood to leave, Adrian reached into her bag and withdrew a small envelope. I almost forgot. I found this when I was packing up the house. I thought you might want it back. Inside the envelope was a photograph, their wedding day, both smiling with genuine happiness, unaware of the path that lay ahead. Dominic slipped it into his pocket without comment and left. Outside, in his car, he immediately called Teresa Reeves. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Blackwell has evidence of the access to hospital records. He's presenting it to the board next week. Teresa's response was characteristically direct. What's our countermove? The USB drive, Dominic replied. I was saving it for later, but we need to accelerate the timeline. Can you meet tonight? That evening, in Teresa's minimalist apartment overlooking the city park, they finalized their strategy. The USB drive, containing recordings of Blackwell's interactions with medical equipment suppliers, would be anonymously delivered to both the hospital board and the district attorney's office. This moves beyond professional misconduct to potential criminal charges, Teresa noted, reviewing the contents. Kickbacks, fraud, possibly tax evasion. Exactly, Dominic confirmed. The board will be too concerned with potential criminal liability to entertain his accusations about electronic snooping. And if they do investigate his claims? The access came from multiple locations, using various methods. Nothing definitively tied to either of us. Teresa studied him thoughtfully. You're very good at this, you know. The calculated dismantling of a person's life. I had excellent motivation, Dominic replied without emotion. The next day, Dominic met with his attorney to discuss a different aspect of his plan, the final, most personal element. As they reviewed the documents he had prepared, the attorney raised concerns. This is unusually generous, given the circumstances of your divorce, he observed. Are you certain this is how you want to proceed? I'm certain, Dominic confirmed. Just ensure it's legally binding and anonymously administered. 3 days later, Dominic received confirmation that both the hospital board and the district attorney had received the USB evidence against Blackwell. By that afternoon, news reports indicated that Blackwell was cooperating with authorities, naming other participants in the kickback scheme in exchange for leniency. His phone rang with a call from Teresa. It worked, she reported. The board meeting ended an hour ago. Blackwell never had the chance to present his accusations. He was too busy responding to the fraud allegations. The DA has issued a warrant for his financial records. And the board's position on the earlier scandal? They've issued a formal statement distancing the hospital from Dr. Blackwell's pattern of ethical violations. Reading between the lines, they're throwing him under every available bus to protect the institution's reputation. That evening, as Dominic sat in his penthouse reviewing the day's developments, he received an unexpected text from Adrian. Breaking news. Vincent Blackwell arrested on fraud charges. I assume you had nothing to do with this? Thank you for keeping me out of it. He didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and sent a pre-drafted email to his attorney, authorizing the execution of the final component of his plan. The dismantling was complete. Now came the true reckoning. Chapter 9, Phoenix Protocol. 1 year to the day after Adrienne's graduation ceremony, Dominic stood at the window of his executive office at Caldwell Industries, contemplating how dramatically his life had transformed. As Senior Vice President of Healthcare Partnerships, he now oversaw relationships with 12 major medical institutions across the region, wielding influence far beyond what his former corporate role had offered. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Severo, your 11 o'clock appointment has arrived. Send her in, Dominic replied, turning from the window. Teresa Reeves entered, now Chief Operations Officer at Glenwood Medical Center following a reorganization that had recognized her capabilities and loyalty during the Blackwell crisis. Congratulations on the promotion, Dominic said, gesturing toward the sitting area. Well deserved. Thank you. Teresa settled into a chair with the confidence of someone whose value had finally been properly acknowledged. The board has unanimously approved the expansion proposal. Caldwell's financing package was instrumental in securing the vote. Excellent news, Dominic replied. The equipment installation can begin next month. They discussed operational details for several minutes before Teresa shifted to a more personal topic. I saw the news about Vincent Blackwell's sentencing. 3 years for fraud seems light, considering. The cooperation agreement reduced the charges significantly, Dominic noted. But his medical career is permanently finished. The licensing board made that clear. And your ex-wife? Any word on her situation? Dominic maintained a neutral expression. She completed her first year of residency at County General. I understand she's transferring to a program in Arizona for the remainder. What he didn't mention was his knowledge that Adrian had struggled financially throughout the year, working additional shifts to cover living expenses while repaying student loans without the salary she had anticipated as a neurology resident. Teresa studied him with her characteristic perception. You know, for someone who orchestrated such a comprehensive revenge, you've been remarkably restrained about enjoying its fruits. Revenge was never the objective, Dominic replied. Consequences were. A semantic distinction. I disagree. Dominic rose to pour coffee for both of them. Revenge seeks to inflict maximum pain. Consequences allow natural repercussions to unfold based on one's actions. Teresa accepted the coffee with a knowing smile. And the anonymous trust that paid off Dr. Severo's remaining student loans last month? Was that a natural repercussion? Dominic's hand paused momentarily. He hadn't realized Teresa knew about that. I have no comment on matters I'm not directly involved in. Of course not, Teresa replied, the skepticism evident in her voice. Just as you had no comment when County General received an anonymous donation establishing a research fellowship that mysteriously aligned with your ex-wife's application timing. The medical community benefits from research support, Dominic said neutrally, regardless of who provides it. Teresa set down her cup. You're a fascinating study in contradictions, Dominic. You systematically dismantled two careers while simultaneously creating secret escape hatches. One might almost think you're not as ruthless as you pretend to be. Or perhaps true ruthlessness includes the power to determine not just punishment, but redemption. Their conversation was interrupted by Dominic's assistant announcing his next appointment. As Teresa prepared to leave, she offered a parting observation. Whatever your motivations, the outcome has been surprisingly balanced. Blackwell lost everything because he abused his position for personal gain. Your ex-wife experienced significant setbacks, but has a path forward if she's willing to earn it legitimately. And you've risen from the ashes of betrayal stronger than before. Phoenix Protocol, Dominic murmured. Pardon, nothing. Just an old project name from my previous life. After Teresa departed, Dominic reviewed his calendar for the remainder of the day. His final appointment was scheduled for 4 p.m., a meeting he had arranged through intermediaries, ensuring the other party wouldn't know who they were meeting until they arrived. The intervening hours passed in a blur of conference calls and financial projections. At precisely 3:55 p.m., his assistant buzzed again. Your 4 o'clock is here, Mr. Severo. Give me 2 minutes, then send her in. Dominic moved to the window, gathering his thoughts. This meeting represented the final element of a plan conceived in the raw aftermath of betrayal, but refined through months of reflection. When the door opened, he turned to face Adrian, who stopped short at the threshold, shock evident in her expression. Dom. The familiar abbreviation slipped out unconsciously. I was told this was a meeting about a research fellowship at Arizona Medical Institute. It is, Dominic confirmed, gesturing toward the visitor's chair. Please sit down. Adrian hesitated before complying, her wariness evident. I don't understand. The email came from the Halston Foundation, a philanthropic organization that partners with Caldwell Industries on certain healthcare initiatives, Dominic explained, taking his seat behind the desk. I serve on their advisory board. Comprehension dawned on her face. The anonymous donation to County General. The loan repayment. That was you. The foundation supports promising medical professionals who demonstrate ethical commitment to patient care, Dominic replied, neither confirming nor denying. Your recent evaluations from County General indicate significant improvement in both clinical skills and professional conduct. Adrian studied him, confusion evident. Why would you help me? After everything I did. Dominic considered his words carefully. The man I was before your betrayal believed in supporting your medical career because it represented something valuable to the world. That belief hasn't changed, regardless of what happened between us personally. I don't deserve your help, she said quietly. This isn't about what you deserve, Dominic countered. It's about what serves the greater good. A talented physician properly supported benefits more people than one whose career is permanently derailed by personal mistakes. That's remarkably pragmatic. I've become a pragmatic person. Adrian hesitated before asking. And Vincent? Was his punishment also pragmatic? Dr. Blackwell abused his position systematically, endangering patients and compromising the integrity of medical education. His consequences were proportionate to those violations. Not to what he did to you personally. That was between him and me, Dominic said simply, as was what happened between you and me. A lengthy silence followed as Adrian processed his words. Finally, she asked, what exactly is this fellowship offering? Dominic slid a folder across the desk. Full funding for the remainder of your residency. A research position afterward if you maintain exemplary performance. No public association with me or Caldwell. The foundation operates independently. Why? She pressed. Why would you do this after I hurt you so deeply? Dominic considered the question, looking past her to the photograph on his credenza. Not their wedding photo, but one from medical school orientation, showing Adrian in her white coat, eyes bright with purpose and potential. Because destroying what someone could become doesn't erase what they did to you, he finally answered. It just adds another casualty to the damage. Adrian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use the opportunity well. Say you'll become the physician you're capable of being. That's the only appropriate response. She nodded slowly. I will. I promise. As Adrian gathered the folder and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Dom, are you happy? In your new life? Dominic considered the question without sentiment. I'm purposeful, effective, successful by conventional metrics. That's not what I asked. It's the answer I have. After she left, Dominic returned to the window, watching as Adrian emerged from the building below, her posture straighter than when she had arrived, her steps more purposeful. His phone buzzed with a text from Len Porter. Board approved your proposal. You're officially our youngest executive VP. Celebration dinner tonight. Dominic typed his response. Thanks. Rain check on dinner. Closing a different chapter tonight. That evening, in his penthouse, Dominic opened the safe hidden behind a modern painting in his study. Inside was a small box containing mementos from his former life. The engagement ring Adrian had discarded, their wedding photograph, and the key to their first apartment. He had kept these items not from sentimentality, but as reminders of the cost of blind trust, of the dangers of self-sacrifice without boundaries. Now, with Vincent Blackwell serving his prison sentence, with Adrian redirected toward legitimate achievement, and with his own professional reinvention complete, these souvenirs had served their purpose. Dominic carried the box to his balcony overlooking the city. The night air carried the first hint of autumn crispness, signaling change and renewal. One by one, he removed the items from the box. The photograph he tore methodically into small pieces, letting them scatter in the wind. The apartment key he dropped 32 stories to the darkness below. The engagement ring he considered for a moment before placing it in an envelope he had already addressed to a women's shelter that supported survivors of domestic violence. One final act of converting pain into something constructive. As he stood alone in the gathering darkness, Dominic acknowledged the transformation of the past year. The naive, trusting man who had sacrificed himself for love was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating, more powerful. Someone who understood that forgiveness was not weakness but the ultimate exercise of control. Choosing to release others from debt, not because they deserved it, but because holding on to vengeance was its own form of servitude. He had not forgiven Adrian or Blackwell. That was a bridge too far for the man he had become. But he had chosen to limit his retribution to what justice demanded rather than what rage desired. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to exercise the influence he had cultivated through his ordeal. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had instead forged him into someone untouchable, someone who would never again be vulnerable to such deception. As he turned to re-enter his apartment, Dominic's phone buzzed with a final text for the evening, from Teresa Reeves. Phoenix rises. Well played. He smiled faintly as he typed his response. Not a game. A reckoning. The door closed behind him with the finality of a chapter ending, leaving the scattered remnants of his former life to dissolve into the night. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.